All right. Hi, everyone. Just real quick, I heard some feedback from last week that there was some glitchiness in the video. So if that happens and you missed something, let me know so I can help set it straight. We're going to jump right in. We're finally at the end of First Corinthians, 19 Bible studies later. We made it through 16 chapters, so it's exciting. Chapter 15 is really intense. Most of the book is pretty intense. Chapter 16 is a little less intense. And because of that, we'll be doing some kind of branch off reading on some of the ideas that come up in chapter 16. So to get started, you're looking first at the first four verses of the chapter, but note in there that there's the Jerusalem collection is in the background. So Paul, as he was going around on a third, I think, missionary journey, he was collecting money for the church in Jerusalem. The church in Jerusalem was primarily Jewish, while the churches in Europe were both Jewish and Gentile, but primarily Gentile. So that's the background. Oh, and the Jerusalem church was more impoverished, so the Gentile churches were helping them and when they were in need. So I have some questions about giving here. To what extent is part of your life? Why is spiritually and practically important for us to give? And then I have you going into Second Corinthians a little bit, and by a little bit I mean a lot. Reading a little bit of chapter 8 and 9, and answering some of those questions. I don't think they're too tough, so I'm not going to get into too much of them there. But what I want to say, just in general, is that giving is an important spiritual discipline. It is important practically to support the work of the church together, right? But also spiritually, it's important for us to recognize that what we have is God's, and to honor Him in that way. We should give according to our means, so we shouldn't impoverish ourselves, but we should also give sacrificially, trusting God to do more than what we can kind of see and understand. God loves a cheerful giver, but that doesn't mean we should only give when we're cheerful. Instead, when we're not cheerful, it's an invitation to kind of look at our motives and maybe what we're hanging on to or what our sense of control is. So hopefully you have a good conversation there, talking through that. And then finally, I have you going to Romans 15 to look at some more specific background about this Jerusalem collection. Collection. The Gentile churches kind of owe the Jewish church this offering, Paul says, because they're their kind of spiritual father, their spiritual ancestor. And what's amazing here is that while Paul does kind of rebuke the Jewish church for this, he's also going to ask the Gentiles, hey, I want you to pour out your love on them by giving to them, even when they want to make it hard on you sometimes. Now, I'm over caricaturing the churches here, and I don't mean to do that. But I think it's amazing that he asked the Gentile churches to go above and beyond to honor the Jewish church. Not that there's two churches, but you kind of get what I'm talking about. And what I think is really important about this is that it would have been really remarkable in that time for the Gentile church to be so outwardly generous to the Jewish church, to break those kind of racial lines. And so, I don't know, maybe socioeconomic lines, I'm not really sure, but it was a sign of unity to those around them who saw this happening, and a sign of love and grace. And I'm just wondering, what I'm wondering is what we can do to show that love and grace to our campus and to the world. So anyway, I don't know how much giving is a part of your life right now. If it's not right now, and if you have no money, or that's fine. Think about giving of other things, but it will be part of your life later. So that's giving. The next section is 5 to 12. I chose 12 because that's what the commentary was doing. You can really break it anywhere here, but I chose 12. So the first item of focus I have here, it has to do with making plans. This idea that Paul both makes plans and kind of holds them loosely. It's the image that I like to have of like having something in your hands, but holding them with kind of palms open to say, like, this is my plan, and I'm open to change, open to follow God's lead. So I have you reading some from James there, and just having you reflect on what it looks like to both make plans and to hold them loosely. And I think what's amazing here is that in verse 8, Paul says that he has a wide open door for ministry, basically. And you're going, okay, cool. He's going to walk into that door, and that's how he's determining some of his plans or change of plans. But then he says, and there are many adversaries. And so I think this gives us a glimpse into how he determines his plans or how he determines there's an opportunity that God has put before him. It is not the, oh, this is the easy path, or look, there's no resistance here, so this must be where God is leading me to. Sometimes that wide open door means this is really hard. God, you know, God is calling me to this. This effect. So, what I say here is that we kind of tend towards this path of least resistance in all areas of our life. Try to make things easy on ourselves, and I understand why we do that, of course. But if we do that with our relationship with God and with other people, we'll get really lazy in our relationship with God and really lazy in our relationship with others. This verse from First Peter kind of point to this idea of like, yeah, you're going to face hardship if you're interacting with them in this Christ-like way and sharing the gospel with them. So, some food for thought there. Hopefully, you have some good conversation. The last little section I have is the final verses, and I pull out a couple points here. Namely, in verse 13, Paul tells them, the ESV says, "Act like men." Other versions say, "Be courageous." And I have an explanation there as to why it's translated sometimes "act like men," which you can see why they say that, but I think courageous is maybe a less loaded kind of word than act like men. But the idea is basically like, I want you to be brave and watchful and stand firm, and yeah. And then he says, let all that you do be done in love. And I think in our heads sometimes those things kind of don't coexist with each other. But I think what he's suggesting, and what he's suggested this whole book, is that true love really does take courage. When you lay your life down for someone, when you use your God given gifts to serve other people, when you lay down your privileges or your rights, like Paul has done for the sake of others, it takes real, true courage, and to kind of act like men. Speaking of that, guys, masculinity needs a challenge here, and I think it's worth leaning into that a little bit. Kind of saying, how does this? I didn't put it in there because this is both genders will be used in Bible study, but for the men, how does this challenge the way we think about masculinity? And maybe the females need to talk about that as well, about how you guys think about men and what you're looking for in solid, firm men. So I don't know, that phrase made me think that, but it's not really about men. It's about Christians in general. It's about being firm and courageous, and that is done through love. Um, and then I have some stuff about the global church. I'm going to have a resource for you down in the challenges, but just some quick questions about the global church. Okay. Finally, I have some conclusion. If you have some extra time, I have a few questions to get you thinking back through the rest of the book and just how God has led you here. And then I have a few challenges that relate to some of these points. One is to give something away this week, whether it be money or something else. Another is to write down your current plans for the next 10 years and consider what needs to be held loosely. I knew a student one time, this is in one of our first couple of years of ministry. This person literally on the computer had a 10-year plan or something like that on her computer. And one night after a worship service, she got out her computer and she's like, "I'm going to delete my plan." And everyone knew she had this plan. And we like watched it as she dragged it over to like the recycling bin on her desktop. And it was this big, like, yeah. But just recognizing that we have plans and God has plans, and sometimes they don't always align. We need to hold ours loosely. So could be a cool exercise to do for some who are really set on plans. The third challenge is kind of considering this path of least resistance that we tend to, and where that's impacting your life, especially in your relationship with God and others. And finally, I have a link for you, some links for you to do some research on the global church and commit to praying for the global church and the persecuted church. Okay, my thing didn't tell me that it went in and out. I hope it didn't. If it did, let me know, and I can re-record anything. So this is the last study. So love you guys. It's been fun to study this with you. See ya.